Jen, it's Monday night. I know there's something that made you do a spit take. What'd you disagree with this week?
So one of the Dallas beat writers came out and said that apparently the Cowboys are planning on using Tony Pollard more in the slot, which is annoying, right? Because that would be great if it were to happen, right? We've all been kind of waiting for this Tony Pollard explosion that's supposed to happen. And I've bought into it the last 2 years and gotten screwed the last 2 years because he's effectively parked behind Ezekiel Elliott on that depth chart, no matter what, unless Zeke has a major injury. Pollard is parked and beyond, behind him, which is really frustrating for fantasy owners. Listen, it would be great if they did do that. Last year, Pollard only ran 10% of his routes from the slot. So that, if he were to get more work in there, that would be great. But I'm frustrated because I don't want to buy in again. Like, I was kind of like, all right, cool. Let everyone else scramble for Pollard in that section where, after the RB dead zone, when people are scrambling for either their RB2 or if they're going 0 RB, they're getting the first one. I don't want to invest in Pollard as much. So I'm going to just ignore this little beat writer, tidbit and just go about my business.
I like it. I think that's fair. Ignore this as best as you can. Pollard already paying for him, so it's not like you were getting a deal anyway. We'll watch and see how that happens versus everybody's favorite rookie Jalen Tolbert in Dallas. We'll see what develops. But let's get to the show. Welcome, everyone, to the most accurate podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brandon Niles. With me are my excellent co-hosts, as always, Jen Eakins and Chris Allen. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. I think we're at the point in the offseason where stories like what Jen laid out with Tony Pollard talking about getting slot snaps, even Lamar Jackson just tweeting that he's in the building now becomes like front row news like for the NFL at this point. So that's a time where I can kind of click the snooze button on all of this stuff. So I'm enjoying the summer at this point. But Jen, how you doing?
I'm good. As I was talking about with you guys before we started recording, I'm really hot. Denver is very hot today and kind of over the climate change, over the heat. It should not be 99 degrees in mid-June in Colorado, but it is, and I'm hot. Other than that, I am good. I am ready to, like Chris says, kind of chill. June is kind of a lazy kind of point of the NFL cycle, so I kind of like to try to take a little bit of a break, which we know is not really possible. But Brandon, what's going on with you?
Oh, not much. I'm now just thinking about entering the building and like theme music. I was trying to imagine, Jen, what your theme music would be. If you arrived in the Baltimore Ravens training facility and you said, Jen is in the building with your tweet, what would be your theme music that would go with it, Jen?
I don't know, man. That's
and Chris, I'm going to ask you too.
Yeah,
you got to know what your
theme I don't know. I was not prepared for this question at all.
Yeah, it's going to be the 4-for-4 theme, right?
Yeah, and I don't even have I don't even have a walk-up song. You know how some people already have that fired up to know if people ask them that. I don't know what I would do. I will say one thing though. Did that theme music that we just played? Did it seem like to go up and down? Like, did it get slow and then faster?
Oh, it's a journey. It's a journey. Yeah. Our music is a trip.
It gets me pumped up. I don't know about you guys.
No, me too. It just sounded this specific time. It got kind of different. I don't know. Maybe that was just could have been me.
So no answer. Jen skirts the question.
I did. I completely skirted. I got nothing.
Chris, theme music.
I would go with Nightmare Dreamscape from Meek Mill. Like the theme or the song that they played for the Philadelphia Eagles when they came out and like played the New England Patriots. Like that has been like one of my favorite songs that still gets me fired up whenever I hear it now. So if I were to have a walk-up music or even just a theme song into the building, it'd probably be that one.
Flawless.
No.
Absolutely flawless. I love it so much. And if you need theme music to get you into best ball action, to help you draft at your absolute best, use it with a promo code. If you deposit $10 in a new Underdog account, you get a deposit bonus match plus a 4for4 Pro subscription. Just enter 4for4 4FOR4 in the promo code box at Underdog. Get you some best ball action. Chris, I would like to hear, before we get into our early round best ball strategy, which is the part 3 of our 3-part series, I want to hear what stat of the week you brought.
All right, so I think, what was it, 3 weeks ago, talked about quarterbacks, did wide receivers, running backs, and now tight ends. I know nobody cares about tight ends, or at least to a certain degree, other than like the early round guys. But I wanted to talk about just like tight ends in general, the tight ends that we don't see coming. Of course, we're always going to draft like the Travis Kelce's, the Mark Andrews, like all of those guys, like the same names, the same faces that wind up in the top 12 like each year. But we we get new faces like each year. I think it was like last year, a couple of guys that popped up. I mean, Kyle Pitts, I mean, rookie, obviously, but also Dawson Knox, like kind of skirted into the back end of the top 12. We've had Logan Thomas, like get into the top 12, like back in 2020. Even if you want to go all the way back, because I know, like Brandon, for you with your trivia knowledge, I mean, some of the guys that folks were drafting back in 2013, like the Charles Clays of the world, like Delaney Walker, like in his prime, like those types of guys that, like, we knew that it was possible.
Charles Clay.
From Buffalo. Yeah. So it's just like those guys that you could squint and see having a role or like being productive in fantasy, but it's just you had to make that bet on them. But like those types of tight ends, like they don't come out of nowhere. Like the research that I looked into, like the veterans that have had like those types of seasons where they pop into the top 12 and then they might be gone the next year, like irrelevant the next year or whatever, like they actually did have a role in their team like the season prior, like for just straight veterans. So guys with 3 seasons or more averaged about a 9% target share, 8.7%, like to be exact. But for guys that were sophomores, so when we looked at, let's say, Dallas Goedert, like in the 2019 season, yeah, we knew he was good. And like based off his draft capital, we expect to be athletic, like so on and so forth. But for any of those guys that would fall into the second year category, like a little bit higher target share, like 9.1%, like target share the year before they wind up like hopping into the top 12. And then for rookies, whether it was Evan Ingram, like his rookie season, Travis Kelce, actually, I counted him because like he was injured, like his actual true rookie season. So when he came out, when was that? Like 2013 or no, 2014 rather. Take that back. I consider that to be his first year. But even like Kyle Pitts, like just last year, 17.6% like for the rookies. So the guys that we knew were going to be athletic, guys that we knew were going to be productive based off their draft capital or whatever, like they wound up having like that level of targets. But it's just the veterans and sophomores, like those are guys that we can at least see in the previous year, and we know that they're going to have like some role in the team. And so like those are the types of bets that I want to make, especially like on some of the late round guys. So Brandon, I guess like kicking it to you first, late round guys, we're throwing darts as it is, but I mean, would you want to try and take a shot on a guy like Mo Alley-Cox is the one that came to mind, at least for me, just because we know that he has a role in the team. We know that at least he's been semi-productive in the past. And if we squint, we can see him having like a significant role in that offense. But I guess, would that be at least a similar process for you when looking at tight ends? Like if you're digging into like any of those late round guys?
Yeah, the more you look at it, the more you see like year 3 tight ends. Usually that's when they start to kind of pop, and those veterans with a high target share, that's usually what you go for. So when we're looking every year for that next tight end that's going to break into the tight end 1 territory, there's always a handful of guys, and very few of them actually end up working out. So you need to take a few darts if you're going that route, and you need to look for the Mo Alley-Coxes, like you just mentioned. And Mo Alley-Cox specifically is, we know what he is. We know he's a guy that needs to be healthy, and we know that if he can be healthy, he can be productive. I kind of like Jelani Woods, the rookie they drafted.
Yeah.
I will say, I don't draft rookie tight ends, so I'm looking at him for dynasty to sit on a taxi squad for 2 years and then take over the job. But same with Greg Dulcich in Denver. Interested in him in about 3 years. But and forget, I promise we are not torturing my toddlers upstairs. If you hear this, they are just
being toddlers.
I'm assuming they're bowling. I think that's the only explanation for the noises that I'm hearing going on up there. But yeah, Mo Alley Cox is somebody like Gerald Everett is somebody I'm still into just because I could see a target share in Los Angeles and a good passing offense. Now I liked him last year in Seattle as well, but that's the way. And then, everybody's favorite player who's gone now is Jared Cook. Like, every year he would show up and he'd last until the ends of the rounds, and he'd always finish like 10th as like the tight end 10. So it's nice when I'm going after tight ends and I'm bargain shopping. I usually try to grab one of those veterans, and then I'll also grab kind of a young guy. So I had a lot of like Gerald Everett and Pat Fryermuth last year, and that worked out because one of them hit. So
yeah, no, I think that absolutely makes sense. And then Jen, for you, I mean, do you try and find like one of those late round guys to kind of pair with any of the early round guys that you might try and target like earlier on? Like if you are drafting a Mark Andrews, a Dallas Goedert, or whomever, I mean, have you looked at any of those late round guys that you could take a shot on, at least feel like, oh yeah, he might get me a few targets, fall in the end zone a couple of times? Like, who was it? I think back in 2013, 2014, you guys remember like Larry Donnell, like from the Giants, like him. Let's see, Richard Rodgers, like when he had like a decent shot, like in Green Bay, like those. Have you looked at those guys in the past?
Yeah, I mean, for this year specifically, like yes, if I'll pay up and get say a Mark Andrews or Waller, then I'll wait and go to the kind of the bottom of the bin. And one of the guys that you guys didn't mention that I'm kind of liking this year is Brevin Jordan. I think that he could possibly have, I mean, that offense is kind of up in the air, right? As far as targets after Brandon Cooks, you have Nico Collins, you have Mechie, and then you've got Brevin Jordan. And, he's coming into a second year. You never know. If I go, I was going to say, like, if I don't pay up, then I'll get maybe two guys a little bit higher than him, maybe like an Everett, and then, say like I don't know, like who else am I thinking?
Don't say Higbee. Just don't say Higbee.
Listen, I don't mention Higbee's name around you, Brandon. No, I was going to say like an Irv Smith or a Robert Tonyan, one of those guys.
Okay, yeah.
I may take two of those instead of, waiting till kind of the Brevin Jordan of the world or the Austin Hooper. Austin Hooper, I mean, a lot of people are kind of ignoring him. And
not bad.
I mean, Tennessee, I mean, you're looking at, Robert Woods, you're looking at, the rookie Burks, and then so I think that, Austin Hooper may have a bigger path to targets than people are really giving him credit for. So those are some of the guys that I've kind of, reach into the bargain bin shop and grab.
Yeah, and I think with late round tight ends, of course, we're throwing darts just like we're throwing darts at almost any position at that point in the draft. But at least the names, I do think that in like as history has shown, the names are not like they're not completely unheard of. Like a lot of the targets that we're looking at there, like you just mentioned, like Austin Hooper, whomever, like we've seen them be productive in the past, or at least have significant roles like in the offenses they've been attached to. So there is some method to the madness. It's just, can the role actually, or can the bet actually wind up paying off? And that's kind of what we're doing with all the rest of the positions once we get to that point in the draft. So tight end really is no different. And so seeing a guy that we could get with the very like last few picks in the draft, we can see them ascend like to the top 12 in tight ends, especially because the position is relatively volatile and it's somewhat easy to get into the top 12 just because it's so predicated on scoring touchdowns. And if you're used within the red zone, just last year, 7 of the top 12 tight ends, like they were also in the top 12 for red zone targets as well. So it's like, if that's what it takes in order to be there, I mean, I think that we can kind of tell ourselves that type of story for almost every tight end that we've mentioned so far. And that's the type of process you can use for finding a guy that you want to take towards the back end of your draft.
Absolutely. I love bargain shopping tight end. I like to stack them. I like to do multiple players. And then one of them usually will hit. It's just if you're banking on one in all your lineups and all your leagues, you better hope that one hits. But, if you can platoon it a little bit, you can usually find somebody that's good. That's a great stat, Chris. I appreciate you diversifying the positions that you go after. It's bringing a lot to the bottom. I appreciate you. Let's do our Scott Fishbowl entry giveaway. Listeners, we had a giveaway last week for an entry into Scott Fishbowl. Our phenomenal producer, Sal, behind the scenes, randomized all the entries, has the wonderful wheel of giveaway fortune up here, going to spin it, going to provide a winner. Sal, who is our winner?
Who are we rooting for again?
I
We're
don't
rooting
know.
for all of these wonderful people.
All of these
All of them?
wonderful people.
Mm-hmm.
Adam at the zoo.
All right.
Adam at the zoo. So Adam at the zoo, 4for4's fantasy football account will reach out to you about your Scott Fishbowl 12 giveaway, your entry. Congratulations at Adam at the zoo. Thank you to everyone who put in an entry and subscribed to YouTube. We really appreciate you. Appreciate the listeners. We love our members. Feel free to reach out to us at any time, and thank you again. So let's go on to our main topic, part 3 of our Underdog Best Ball Strategy, early round targets. This is rounds 1 through 5 or picks 1 through 60 if you prefer. I want to go a little different instead of just going position by position, because I feel like in the early rounds, it's less targets and more strategy. At least a little bit. We'll talk targets and talk strategy or talk players that we like, but I don't want to do it quite the same way we did the last two. I want to start with kind of some overall strategy. Jen, I want to start with you. Draft position in the early rounds. What, I guess, which spots dictate heavily your strategy? Like if you're picking in the back end or the middle or the first, do you already kind of have a strategy mapped out from there?
Sorry, on mute. It is interesting because I feel like in years past, it's been very kind of cut and dry. Like we're talking picks 1 through 5 are running backs, and then it's kind of a crapshoot. But I feel like this year it's a little different. I feel like this year, that first pick, I've seen wide, I've seen Cooper Kupp go first. I've seen Jonathan Taylor go first. I've seen McCaffrey go first. I've seen Justin Jefferson go first. So I think this year people are definitely mixing it up, which is fun. I like to mix it up anyway, but I feel like if I'm on the back half of the draft, I'm probably going to start out with 2 wide receivers, depending on who's there. I'm just not a huge fan of the running backs that are usually left in that back side of the first round, if that makes sense. I'm not gonna take Joe Mixon there. I'm not gonna, there's only a certain amount of running backs that I will take a first round pick on. So if I'm, say 7 and up, 7 through 12, I am, 80% gonna probably take a wide receiver there. Unless someone falls. Like if Najee Harris falls or if Eckler falls, I may grab him there or one of them there. But it's most likely that's what I'm going to do. Now, if I'm in the front half, it really depends on what happens before me and I'll mix it up. But I will take, like I said, I will take, Taylor, I will take McCaffrey, I will take Kupp, I will take Jefferson. If I'm 1 through 5, I'll take any combination of those guys, whoever is there and whoever I'm just kind of feeling at the moment. I'm never one of those people that sits down in a draft and is like, all right, I'm taking 2 running backs in the first 4 rounds. I'll take, a lot of people are very regimented that way. I'm not that way in life, and I'm certainly not that way in drafting football. So I'm kind of a go with the flow kind of gal.
Yeah. I like that. That makes a ton of sense to me. When we talk redraft, when we get there, I want to hear in depth which receivers you're targeting that early in the draft. But I understand diversifying lineups and taking different ones in best ball. That's part of your best ball strategy, and part of the best ball strategy is to evaluate how many entries, evaluate whether you're doing smaller, 12-person leagues, 3-person leagues, or whether you're doing the tournament, because these strategies are different and they change. Chris, how do those different strategy types that you enter in best ball impact how you approach the early rounds?
Actually, to be quite honest, it doesn't change a ton, at least from a draft slot standpoint. And actually, using the roster construction tool that we have at 4for4, we can look at like how teams have advanced over the past couple of seasons, now that we have enough tournament data to kind of give us a feel for what should our rosters look like after we get out of the 6th round, or as we're getting done with the early phase of the draft, what is the most optimal in terms of advancing throughout some of these tournaments. And what I've found is essentially couple of running backs, 4 wide receivers, couple of running backs, maybe 3 wide receivers and a tight end. Those have the highest advance rates, about a 20% advance rates for a 20% advance rate for 2 running backs and 4 wide receivers, 19.8% advance rates for the 2-3-1 build that I just talked about. But you're essentially not overloading your draft or overloading your roster early. So the zero RB discussion, which I'm sure we'll have, while it has its own merits, optimally, or like at least historically, it hasn't been able to hit, but we only have 2 seasons of data. So it's not like we're out on zero RB. It's just that for the teams that have done it, the teams that have used it, like it hasn't advanced as much as we would like to see, or for at least the folks that like employing that type of strategy. But that's the type of way that I try and approach it. I try and look at it from that standpoint. Like, am I actually building a sound roster, like structurally? And if that's the case, like I'm not having 5 running backs like to start my squad, or I'm not investing like too heavily at the onesie positions, like having like 2 early round quarterbacks, and so I'm left essentially hanging on like the core positions, which would be for me running back and wide receiver. So if I can stick somewhere in that 2-4, or a couple running backs, or maybe 3-3, or 2-3-1, like I mentioned, if I can end the early phase like with that level of allocation like to each of those positions, then at least from there I can start then piece together the rest of my roster by stacking my running backs and wide receivers with the quarterback, like once we get into the mid rounds or whatever the case may be. But at least for the early rounds, that's the type of structure that I want to try and have like as I get through the first 6 rounds.
So based on what you're saying with the configurations you listed, you're rarely approaching the onesie positions in this early part of the draft. Is that correct?
Typically, that's my personal preference. If I do that, like I have done like the 2-3-1 build because I have a ton of Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce on rosters. Just because if I do have a later draft slot, I do wind up with Mark Andrews there because you wind up getting him on the wrap, like after, like, let's say at the 203, 204, like somewhere in that range. So if I get Mark Andrews, okay, fine. But then I know how to adjust the rest of my roster. So I am kind of, again, building like a sound roster from a structural standpoint.
Sure. Jen, are you having a similar approach to the onesie positions? We've talked a lot about how we're not really paying up for tight end, you and I. When you're looking at diversifying your builds and you're looking at the onesie positions, what do you find yourself ending up with in these first rounds?
Well, like Chris said, I definitely have my fair share of Andrews, and in a similar position, you kind of get him on the wraparound, or if he falls to, sometimes he'll fall to the end of the second, and I'll certainly grab him there. I'm grabbing a little bit of Waller because I'm kind of, and I think we're going to get into stacks later, but I kind of like, grabbing, Devontae Adams and Waller, and then grabbing Carr later. I've been known to do that a little bit here and there. So, but other than that, I'm not really going. I definitely don't have. I don't think I have any Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. Like I definitely have not taken a quarterback that early at all. If I end up with, Mark Andrews, I'll certainly, try to sprinkle in some Lamar if I can get there. But I will say, I don't think that I've drafted George Kittle this season.
Interesting.
Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, I don't think I've done it. I just, he just scares me. He I don't know. I just feel like I invested kind of heavily in him last year, and when on the field, he's great. He just, he's a maniac and he gets hurt. And, but his price is decent. I mean, it's definitely slipped this season due to that reason, but I don't know. I have to check my exposure, but I don't remember clicking that button for him at all this season yet.
I can't believe he's like 28, 29 years old. I just feel like he's only been in the league.
Yeah, I feel like he's like 36. He just plays. He's a maniac, and that's great, when he's on your team and when he's on the field, but he just sets himself up to just get clobbered, I feel like.
Yeah.
And that goes in line with what we talked about last week, that there's a lot of quarterbacks that we really like in rounds 6 through 12. Like there's a lot of guys you could get that you could foreseeably tell a story about them becoming the QB3, QB1, QB4 at the end of the season. We've talked about Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott and players like that. I will admit, Justin Herbert in the 4th happens sometimes for me. That happens for me sometimes.
I've done that. Yeah.
But especially when I get Eckler early on, or if I take Mike Williams or Keenan Allen, in the 3rd or something like that, I'll often wrap around and get Herbert there. But I'm with you on the onesie positions for the most part. In these early rounds, a lot of the questions that I come up with, we just talked about George Kittle and the injuries. There's other guys with injury concerns. We saw Derrick Henry finally seem almost human last year when he missed some games. Less human when he came back and still looked like an utter literal monster. But him,
he was
and
the RB1 in fantasy points, just so you know. Even though, let's be real there.
Insane. He's incredible. And CMC, obviously 2 years injury plagued. When he still, though, during the 2 years when he sees the field, he's productive. Alvin Kamara has been a little banged up, but might be facing a suspension. We don't know yet. Saquon Barkley, 2 injury-plagued years now. We'll see what happens with him. How are you, Chris, approaching these guys that have the injury tags and the injury concerns that you're really not getting much of a discount for? How much are you sprinkling them into your lineups right now?
I'm taking them at cost, to be quite honest, because we don't know what or how the injuries, like if they're actually going to occur again. And for at least all of the early round guys, there's been no news that I've seen to indicate that they're behind schedule or
it's all glowing right now.
It's all glowing right now. Like Christian McCaffrey still looks decent. I've heard positive reports about Derrick Henry as well. So each of those guys, I mean, outside of the looming suspensions, like you mentioned for Alvin Kamara, because I think I just read a report earlier today saying David Johnson was visiting the Saints or something along those lines.
Well, that's interesting and completely not.
Right. Yeah. So it's just like those things that pop up and just like, okay, maybe there's something to that. But regardless, but for the injury concerns or for the guys that have had injury concerns, like just last season, no, like I at least cannot predict injuries. So I'm not going to pretend to. I will at least assume that they're healthy until we get word that there's concerns about they're not going to be available for training camp. Like we just heard about, if I'm remembering correctly, I can't remember the player's name offhand, but like if we start to hear that sort of discussion, then okay, fine. I will, ease off on drafting said player. But for the early round guys, I haven't heard anything to that at this point. So I'm assuming they're healthy, and I'll be more than happy to take them at cost as of right now.
Excellent. I think I get too skittish on guys coming off injuries. I think I have a short memory, and I think I get a little too skittish. Adam Hutchison, our resident physical therapist that writes a ton of great content at 4for4. He does the training room update during the season. Just had a phenomenal article about Christian McCaffrey and about how unrelated each of his injuries are to each other and why he is not super concerned about Christian McCaffrey. So it's
same for Barkley too, if I'm remembering right.
Barkley too, yeah. And he was a big proponent for Barkley last year as well, and he's kind of buying him again this season. Jen, if you have something on that, feel free. But I also want to hear, we talked about stacks, so lead into your approach to stacks. Like, do you reach for them? Is it something you gear for, or is it something you kind of let happen as it does?
No, I have nothing to say on the injury. I was about to chime in about the McCaffrey article because I edited it this morning, so I knew that was it was on the site. He hasn't done the Barkley one. He's got, because he and I went over the plan. He's got about 4 more that will be coming out on some of the bigger injury guys coming up.
Yeah, he's great stuff.
So as far as stacks go, do I reach for them sometimes? I mean, I try not to. There's times where, it depends on what you really consider a reach, right? I mean, I'm not going to reach like 2 rounds for somebody, but if I know that, they're not coming back, in the next round, then I may take them 7 or 8 picks ahead of their ADP, just because it's somebody that I want. I think maybe it was last week we were talking about Russell Wilson and how I just can't.
I wanted to hear if you've got him yet.
I did, but I reached for him a little bit. I reached like a half a round for him, but I did finally get him because I wanted him. I just kept finding myself not in the right draft slot to get him. But I do, I wanted to get a Bronco stack, and because that Bronco KC game in Week 17 is, could be a shootout. So I wanted to kind of, load up on both of those stacks. But yeah, I mean, I think stacks are important in best ball. I know there's some people that think that they're not, and they'll just draft willy-nilly, and that's fine. But I know the whole Week 17 correlation is kind of the hot button thing that's going on right now. Everyone's talking about it, but even before that, just regular stacks I think are super important. And I don't like to leave drafts without at least a big stack and then a couple little mini stacks, or even 2 big stacks and a couple mini stacks. And so yeah, I do. It is something that I look for. I'm not going to crazy reach, but I'll kind of reach a little, meander.
I like it. Yeah. Which receiver did you pick on your stack?
Always Sutton.
Always Sutton.
Always.
Yeah, me too. I've been liking that too.
I have a little Judy just because I feel like, a lot of people are just kind of taking that. Okay. Because last year was not great for him. I mean, let's be real. He was hurt and he wasn't effective. But it was also a totally different system, different quarterback, different coach. You had the Fangio era, which is totally different. So I think that we have to give Judy a little bit of grace here, and I'm not completely ignoring him, but I do like Sutton. And it's funny you mentioned Greg Dulcich. Like I'm cool. I'll take him. I mean, even though we know rookies don't perform, and I'm not going to take him a lot or anything, but I will take him with my last pick because he'll be there. And you never know. He pops up one random game for 2 touchdowns, and he's worth it already at that point.
Yep.
So,
and he could do it. Alberto, not exactly a bastion of health so far in his young career. Hoping he's healthy. I'm rooting for the
kid. And he's got beautiful
but,
hair. I mean, there's that
too. Which is the most important thing, I think.
Of course.
Chris, let's talk zero running back just a little bit. Describe quickly the Cliff's Notes version of what zero running back is and what your zero running back strategy looks like when you find yourself following that in the early rounds.
Sure. And I am obviously not the person to go and talk to you about the core tenets of zero RB. Definitely go and take a look at Sean Siegel's original article from the 2012 time period, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, Sean's great.
Like Sean, like I wanted to say like the greatest philosophers like regarding like fantasy football of our time. But at least for me, especially if we're talking about like underdog, like best ball content, like if that's the context of this conversation, for me, zero RB is no running backs in the early rounds, because the early rounds essentially dictate how much we're going to be allocating like towards each of those positions. Like we were talking earlier about whether you go 2-3-1, 2-4, 1-2, whatever the case may be, because we do know at least the highest producers are likely to come like from those early rounds. So if you make the decision to merely say, I'm not going to go with any running backs during the early rounds, to me, that signifies more of a zero RB build versus saying it has to be 6 wide receivers off the board, 7 or whatever. And my early round construction has typically been 5 wide receivers and 1 early round tight end, just because I do like to have that flexibility of having the early round tight end to have strength at not just one position, but 2 positions coming out of the early rounds. So if I can get a Travis Kelce and then a slew of wide receivers afterwards, or Mark Andrews and a slew of wide receivers, or whatever the case may be, that gives me strength that I already know coming out of the early rounds, wide receiver is going to be a strength of my roster. But now if I have that locked in with a tight end as well, then so much the better. And I prefer that route because stacks are something that, since we were just talking about it, stacks are something that I try and approach naturally. I don't want to lock myself in to say that, well, because I drafted Keenan Allen, that means I have to get like Justin Herbert, or because I drafted Mike Evans, I have to draft Tom Brady. That's actually not a good example, because Tom Brady is available at fairly affordable prices,
sure,
like eighth or ninth round. But again, like I don't want to lock myself into that stack the moment that I select that early round wide receiver. But at least with 5 wide receivers, or however, like if I go 5 wide receivers and a tight end, I just have 5 options at quarterback already that I can like naturally stack with any of those guys that I've selected in the early rounds. So doing it that way versus going early round QB, at least it gives me that flexibility to kind of mix and match like what my stacks are going to be like later on. And you can work in the week 17 correlations as you want to, because a lot of the guys that you would take from a wide receiver standpoint in the early rounds, they do kind of naturally correlate, because you can get Devontae Adams and Deebo Samuel right out the rip, and like those guys correlate. Mike Evans and DJ Moore correlate. So it's just like there's easy ways to kind of fit those core concepts into your best ball, for zero RB, without having to stretch, without having to take guys well ahead of their ADP, which will wind up affecting your ability to actually advance that team like later on. So that's at least my general approach to doing like zero RB.
It's also interesting, with the injuries we see at the running back position. I always hear that as one of the aspects of why you might approach it that way. You take kind of the receivers that don't take as much of the beating, and then you just kind of hope you get lucky with some of those backup and third down backs. Jen, do you have, I'm curious, when you go in with a zero receiver strategy, which I'm hearing more and more as a statement. Some of our friends that we've had on the show before have discussed zero receiver. Hillel Chami is one. And then we've had Dave Kluge came on, and I know he's a big zero receiver guy. I tend to kind of be the traditionalist in me, likes going running back early. It's just kind of who I am. But Jen, when you're going zero receiver, what does that strategy look like for you?
I can honestly say I've never gone zero receiver. I don't think ever in a draft. So that is not something that I'm comfortable doing. But I would assume that if others were doing it, they are, listen, I've seen many RB hoarders, over the years in these drafts, and they'll start out, 4 running backs and a tight end, or 4 running backs and a quarterback. I just can't stomach it. Like, I can't kind of go in and have, my wide receiver 1, something. I can't even, like, Marquise Brown, or I don't know, just something to where you're getting a team's, I don't know. I can't do that. I need good wide receivers on my teams to feel comfortable. So I definitely don't go that route, but I see it a lot. I see 1 to 2 guys or gals in each draft room that will start out, either 4 running back straight, or they'll go 2 and then a tight end, they'll go 2 straight and then grab, say, Kittle or Waller or whatever in the 3rd, and then keep going with 2 more running backs after that. And then they just hammer those, those middle wide receivers that I understand that they can hit, and I can understand that they can have good weeks. I mean, you're going to get, decent production from some of these guys, but it's just not, it's not someone I'm comfortable with where, my mind is blank right now. I'm like a good, where you're kind of like, okay, so you're starting, like Allen Robinson, like, he's fine, but I don't want him to be my wide receiver 1,
Sure.
or I don't want Juju Smith-Schuster to be my wide receiver 1, or Bateman. I mean, Bateman's fine this year, and I know people are excited about him, but I don't feel comfortable with that build. So I don't do it, but I see a lot of people that do it, and I don't know what the numbers are for advance rate and how those do, but in my mind, it's not the optimal strategy, at least for my liking.
And
Sure.
more to your point, Jen, the guys that we're listing off, it's almost like there's a specific archetype of receiver that you'd be looking for after you do that, like, run of running backs. And maybe if you do grab a quarterback and tight end to finish off the early rounds, there's almost a specific receiver that you would want to have. And that will probably force you to take them ahead of their ADP.
Right, exactly.
So, like, you're forcing it at that point. So it's like, okay, if, let's say, a guy like Devonta Smith, who could be at least have a decent target share, like for the Eagles this season, like, he could be that guy. But again, unless he falls to you once you get to the 7th round, because I think I've typically seen him go in the 6th, again, you're forcing that player, you're forcing that archetype. And so that's where, again, you're going against one of the core or basic tenets of building a best ball roster, which is not to be reaching on guys on ADP,
right,
or at least not to significantly reaching on them. So that's where, again, I'm 100% with you, where I wouldn't feel comfortable at doing it, because in my mind, I know that I'd be looking for that specific guy, because I'm with you. I don't want Amon-Ra St. Brown to be like my wide receiver 1. I'd prefer him to be my wide receiver 3 or 4. So it's like, unless I see that wide receiver that I could potentially see having a wide receiver 1 outcome, then it's like, I don't know. It just feels awkward, and I feel like I'd be forcing it for the rest of the draft.
Yep.
Good stuff. I like this. So some of these more extreme strategies obviously result in a little bit more extreme results, but we can skip this based on what we talked about. I want to talk about, like, favorite targets for each of those strategies. I know for me, I was going to cheat a little bit, because I just don't go 0 running back. I tend to be a little bit more balanced. I don't go full on 0 wide receiver either. If I go running back in the first 2 rounds, I'm probably hitting receiver in the 3rd and 4th round. But I know when I'm doing 0 receiver, or if I'm going that approach, I really like it probably means I'm in the back part of the draft, which is the opposite of what you said, Jen. But it's because I'm seeing more receivers go in the top 8 picks than I ever have playing fantasy football. Like, it's, Cooper Kupp,
sure.
Justin Jefferson, all those guys are gone by the time. So if I'm back into the draft, I have no problem taking Najee Harris or Dalvin Cook or Joe Mixon, and just kind of double tapping the position there. And that's what usually leads me into my 0 receiver strategy. Chris, when you're looking at 0 running back or 0 wide receiver, really, which targets are you looking at in those first couple rounds, or in those few early rounds?
I want those, like, especially for 0 running back, I want essentially the antithesis of the anchor RB, where you got the no doubt starter at running back. I want the no doubt starter at wide receiver. Stephon Diggs has been that guy for me. And then also, if I can lock in a guy like Mike Evans on the wrap, like in the 2nd round, we already know, like with Mike Evans, at least at best, Godwin might miss a couple of games to start the season. At least the Bucs have no incentive to bring him back as quickly as possible, considering they could sleepwalk to the playoffs at this point with the way that the
Seemingly.
NFC South is looking like, and without where we don't know Gronk's status as well. So just all the targets for Mike Evans. So if I can lock in like those two wide receivers, like right off the bat, and then I can easily do the week 17 correlation because Buffalo gets Cincinnati. I can grab a Tyler Boyd later, or if I'm done with wide receivers at that point when Tyler Boyd comes up, I can maybe grab a Chris Evans or Samaje Perine at running back because I'm going to be looking at a probably 6 running back like type build. So I'd probably grab a Chris Evans like for that week 17 correlation. And with Tampa Bay, like I already mentioned, DJ Moore is available. If you think that Robbie Anderson's tweet over the weekend is, just him having a bad day, you can grab Robbie Anderson later. Or if you want to grab Donta Foreman, also, it's because you're going to have a number like a decent number.
You're talking me into this, Chris.
So it's just like it's possible to do all of those things. Have at least a strong start or structurally sound, at least for a zero running back early, and then also be able to do the week 17 correlation late without reaching on any of those guys. And that's the whole point of building some of these rosters optimally.
Jen, how about I like this Carolina stacking, this late round Robbie Anderson, Deontay Foreman stacking. I love this approach. I'm definitely doing a lot of that with both those players. Jen, who are your 0 running back and 0 wide receiver targets in the early rounds?
If I'm going 0 RB, I like getting Adams. As I said earlier, stacking him with, Carr, Renfro, Josh Jacobs, whatever. It's all there. And then the correlation there is going to be San Francisco, so you can grab like a Jeff Wilson, later guys there. I do like also with Adams, I do like either CeeDee Lamb because I do like that correlation too. Dallas plays Tennessee, so all those Tennessee guys are available super late. Or like Chris said, Mike Evans. So really, I like to do like Adams, Lamb if I'm right on the turn, because Lamb will go, usually right there, and then Evans will sneak in a little bit later into the round. And then if I'm going 0 wide receiver, which I don't really do, but I would do, like an Eckler or Jones, or I will, we'll do like a, Najee Harris, Eckler if he happens to come back, or Najee Jones. One of those guys, like Chris said, that you're not, like if you're not going hero RB, which is one of the, stellar, then you kind of grab that second guy on the way back. I'm not a Mixon gal. Even I know last year he was great, and I know he proved, better last year. I still just can't do it. I don't know. There's something within me that cannot draft Joe Mixon.
No, I think that's fair.
I don't know what it is. Like, last year it was the O-line. I refused, and I know that they've made some improvements there, but I still just. I mean, I'll probably actually now. I don't know if I can. I may not. We'll have to see. So far, I definitely have not.
Another combo that I've been doing, even if I'm not going to do, because I probably won't do 0 wide receiver at all. Like I've had too much like Denny Carter experiences. Like
right.
so there's no way I could do it. But like Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones, like right off the bat, because even they're not reaching on ADP, already have the week 17 correlation built in, like right there. I mean, it's just like an easy way to start off like with a solid running back duo. And if you want to do the 0 wide receiver thing, just continue to build from there. But
that's I will say that week 17 correlation for those two teams is great because there's so many. I mean, Osborne and Lazard and what's his name? What's his name? Dubs.
Or if you want to grab Randall Cobb in like the 18th round, if you want to.
Robert Tonyan, Irv Smith, Kirk Cousins, they're all there. Yeah.
I love it. So we're talking stacks. That's a good segue. So Jen, since you were just talking stacks, what are some stacks that you think are worth paying for when you're paying up early? And this could be 2 players that are worth stacking early, or it could be players that are worth the cost because the stacks are cheap later. Either way, what are kind of your favorite teams to stack with an early round starting point?
So I did mention the, Devontae Adams. I like that stack. Sometimes I'll grab Waller too if I'm going early tight end and then throw Carr in there. And then, like I said, I'll correlate with San Francisco, Mitchell, Jeff Wilson, one of those guys. The other stack I like on the early side is the Chargers. I've definitely done my share of Allen and Herbert and then grab like an Everett, Josh Palmer later. And then you can kind of correlate that with the Rams. You can get some Darrell Henderson or, any of those guys kind of on the later side after you get, A-Rob and Cooper Kupp, of course. So there's Higbee, of course. I know, Brandon, you hate him, but he is available for that. He is available for that correlation.
I'm
if
sorry, I
you
just
want.
threw up a little. I'm sorry.
But
my bad.
yeah, it's one of those things that Allen, and a lot of people, you can even do Allen, Williams, and Herbert. You're paying premium at that point, and I really haven't kind of done that yet because I think it's weird. Allen and Williams go very close together in ADP. And,
you're paying a third round pick for them. Yeah,
like I've seen people at the turn, grab like Jonathan Taylor or McCaffrey, and then hit Allen, Williams, and then grab Herbert, later on. And listen, it's a great stack. I think that Herbert is just getting into the goodness for him. So, but yeah, I would say the Chargers, and then grabbing either Devontae and or Waller, and then waiting later with those are kind of the two earlier stacks I usually go for.
Excellent. Chris, what's a stack? What are some early stacks that you think are worth paying for?
Any of the Denver stack. So give me any of the Denver guys. Like if you want to go Javonte, Russ, and then insert one of the later round wide receivers. So give me Tim Patrick, give me KJ Hamler. I mean, those are all easily affordable at their ADP. And then the week 17 correlation for them, which is Kansas City. I mean, you can hit MBS later. You can take Juju at cost if you want to, because again, the way that I'm trying to approach it is trying to get these guys naturally, get them at ADP without having to reach. Russ, his ADP, I've tried to let him fall to where his ADP is at, and I've gotten sniped a number of times in doing so. But if you wanted to try and go about at least the right way, at least the optimal way, I think that would be the best. So love the Denver stacks. The Rams stacks are all fairly affordable, minus unless you have an early round pick or early draft slot to get Cooper Kupp. But all the rest of the guys, Stafford fairly affordable. Darrell Henderson, if you're still on that train, also going way late unless you love Cam Akers.
So is Kupp worth paying up for if you've got the second, third, fourth pick and he's sitting there?
So.
Worth paying? Okay.
Yeah, I would say take him at cost too, fourth overall, third, fourth overall. Absolutely. Because again, you can naturally get Matthew Stafford with a much later round pick. We won't mention the tight end that plays for the Rams, but also has an affordable ADP as well. So just again, that's the theme. That's the way I want to go about it. Baltimore also too. I mean, Lamar, for what we think his ceiling could be, being drafted as the QB5 at this point, when we know he has top 2-3 upside. And then the Pittsburgh week 17 correlation, get Freiermuth in the 11th, 12th round, Claypool in the 9th, 10th round, Deontay Johnson, if you want to take him at cost, not a bad option as well. So it's all three of those teams have all their players at ADP very affordable and easily stackable with the week 17 correlation too.
Yeah, that week 17 correlation. So we've been talking for weeks now about underrated games that week, games that might be worth looking at that probably no one's looking at. When I'm diversifying lineups, Colts Giants in week 17. And I know this sounds terrible, but new offenses and new quarterback situation with the Colts, I feel like that game could produce some fantasy points.
Sure.
So I have a couple mega Colt stacks, which 3.1's a little early.
They're so
to take
easy
Michael
to
Pittman.
do, though. They're so easy.
Right. So I'll do a lot of Jonathan Taylor and then Tyreek Hill and then Michael Pittman. I'll do if I'm picking first or second and Taylor's there. And then you could get I always get Matt Ryan, Naheem Hines, and Mo Alley Cox. I end up with a mega Colt stack because those last three are so cheap.
Sure.
And then I'm happily paying for Chargers. I just Eckler in the first, and then one of those receivers, and then Herbert in the fourth, and Everett late. I love it.
That game is one of my highest stacked games at this point.
Me too. I want to throw out one more game that I don't think we've talked about in all the pods that we've been talking about, the week 17 correlation. It's super gross when you think about it, but then at the same time, because it's we've talked about the Houston Jacksonville, right? Gross, but potential. Haven't talked about Detroit Chicago. That's gross. It's kind of gross, but at the same time, it's you can get all those guys, and if it ends up being a crazy shootout, then you're moving on, So
and you never know.
Detroit. There's not a lot of expensive pieces in that game, right?
Nope.
I mean, beyond
because their wide receiver one, Darnell Mooney, is going in the 6th or 7th round, if I'm remembering.
And then you
correctly.
got all the, you got.
I think Swift is the only one you got to pay for.
Right. I mean, right. Or TJ Hawkinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're whatever. But I mean, Goff is always there at the end. Super cheap. Justin Fields is, and I feel I don't
some
know if a
Khalil
lot of
Herbert
people,
late.
yeah, I don't know if a lot of people have been kind of talking about that game as one of those gross games that could actually produce some points at the end.
I
I'm
love
with
it. I
you.
love it. Let's talk about the other side of the coin. So stacks that are too expensive in the early rounds to invest in. So let's start with you, Chris. Like, which stacks are you kind of shying away from early rounds because they're too expensive?
I have been unable to do the Diggs Allen, like the primary Bill stack. I
Sure.
have plenty of like just mini correlations with that Buffalo Cincinnati game because I do have Diggs on a number of rosters. But like I was talking earlier, you feel like you're locked into that stack. At least some folks feel like they're locked into that stack the moment that they take Stephon Diggs, and I'm trying to at least get away from doing that. And I can just still get that week 17 correlation without having to force myself into drafting Josh Allen at cost. So it's just been too expensive for me to do. I would rather just wind up grabbing, like I mentioned earlier, Tyler Boyd later, Chris Evans later. If I want to also like pair Diggs with Devin Singletary as well, like Devin Singletary, James Cook,
It's
or
nice.
whomever, I can, mix and match or like piece together enough players like from that game in order to have enough exposure to be happy with it without also having to take Josh Allen.
I like that. The Josh Allen is awfully expensive. As much as we like him, it makes sense to kind of shy away. And then you're banking on two of your first three picks to be Bills, which is
Yeah.
interesting. But that is expensive. It's very
I don't want to
expensive.
slander. I mean, TJ probably already has me
Sure.
muted anyway, so I don't want to slander Josh Allen, but it's just it does come at a heavy cost though.
It does, absolutely. Jen, what's an early round stack that's not worth the price of admission to you?
Well, I don't know if this really counts as early round because I know that he's not necessarily 1 through 5. I think he's a 6-rounder, but the Chase Burrow, like I just don't know that it's a little pricey for me because Chase is insanely, and Higgins is even pretty high. I mean, they're both, rounds 1 and 2, and then all of a sudden, round 6 you have Burrow, and he may even sneak up to a 5th-rounder by the end of the season. Or by the end of draft season, depending on what happens. So, I mean, it's not like it's super duper pricey, but it's just one that I don't seem to kind of do. Like it just doesn't, I don't end up going there. I think I kind of skip, I think that tier of quarterbacks in general, if that makes sense. Like I don't,
Sure.
I'm either going to get, Herbert or Kyler or Lamar. And then I kind of wait to go to like Russ or Tom Brady or, I kind of skip the Burrow. I don't know. I guess it's just him because I've taken Hurts and I've taken, so I guess it's just Burrow. And I have nothing against him as a real life or fantasy quarterback. I just don't find myself in a position to take him, I guess.
Higgins in the second, which is what I'm seeing. Higgins in the second. I'm kind of with you, Jen. We talked last week about Elijah Moore in the 6th. You're drafting him at his ceiling. Like you're drafting him saying he's going to produce at the ceiling. Higgins, and I love T. Higgins. I love him as a player. I wish the Dolphins had him. Like I love T. Higgins, but I feel like T. Higgins in the second is drafting him at his ceiling. Like you're drafting him hoping for the maximum output for him. Do you feel the same way, Jen, or am I being too hard on it?
No, I mean I've done it. I've taken him, and I probably continue to. But when you actually sit down and think about it, like you're saying, yeah, I mean you're taking a team's wide receiver 2 in the 2nd round when there's a lot of wide receiver 1s with a lot of volume that are still there, and it's hard to kind of justify that. But I've done it. I just like you said, I think it's a little scary and it's a little bit. Yeah, I mean, you're investing a lot in someone that is not. He's the second guy on a team where I don't know. Like you said,
I've seen him go above Devontae. I've seen him go above Devontae.
Oh
Adams,
wow, I have not seen that.
Because every once in a while I'll see Devontae Adams slide to the mid-second. I'll see that happen sometimes.
Not if I'm in there, but yeah.
So, Chris, am I crazy? Just the resident Bengals fan have to ask.
It's not. I'll just say that it's not outlandish to think that T. Higgins could have a better year. Just last year, if you look at their total season output, Jamar Chase, 24.2% target share, if I remember correctly. And then T. Higgins had a 23.9% target share. So they weren't that far off. And that's in total target share. And remember, there were a number of weeks where T. Higgins essentially just disappeared from the offense. Yep. I think he missed a game, if I remember. Either way. But the splits, like once the Bengals offense actually started being like more pass heavy, T. Higgins actually did wind up out targeting Jamar Chase like down the stretch last year. So
interesting.
It's not outlandish to think that Jamar Chase, let's say, takes a step back is probably like too extreme of a term, but let's just say
normalizes.
There we go. Thank you. That's a better term for what I'm saying. So it's like there's a chance that Jamar Chase doesn't hit his ceiling. So that allows more work for T. Higgins in order to be, because they also were almost matched in terms of air yard share as well. So it's not, so I'm just saying like the bull case for T. Higgins is that Jamar Chase just has let's say the sophomore slump, but he's still a wide receiver 1. But instead of him being the wide receiver 2 as he's being drafted, he's like, let's say the wide receiver 8 or 9. But then T. Higgins, who's being drafted as, let's say, the wide receiver 6, he then bumps up to the wide receiver 3 or 4 just because the production now tilts his way this season. It's possible. I'll just say that. Like the red zone targets, like all the opportunity, air yard share, all that is there for T. Higgins in order to overtake Jamar Chase just for this season. It's not to say that Jamar Chase is bad. It's just that offense has clearly supported 2 wide receivers. And we could just see this season that the order of those wide receivers just flips and it's Higgins-Chase instead of Chase-Higgins.
Interesting. No, it's one of those things in the second round that always strikes me. I'm not buying the Chiefs stack. It's just too expensive. Kelsey, late first, early second still, and then Mahomes in the third if he lasts that long. I'm not buying that. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I don't want to take him in the running back dead zone. There's other targets there that I'd rather take. And then all those receivers are creeping up in ADP too. It's just not that I won't have any Chiefs on my roster, but it's not going to be a stack that I target heavily because of that. Chris, are you buying that? Do you have any? I know you have Kelsey, but do you have any like Mahomes? Do you have any of the big Chief stacks?
Surprisingly, no. And after I got done running through 20 puppies on Underdog, I looked through and I was like, I had not drafted Patrick Mahomes, not a once.
Interesting.
Yeah, I have like plenty of other Chiefs around him. I don't think I've drafted Sky Moore or Justin Ross. I have a little bit of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but no Patrick Mahomes. I've just found myself taking either other quarterbacks in that range, wide receivers or running backs to fill out the core positions. But it's just, I agree with you. It's funny though, last year when essentially Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Patrick Mahomes stack was like the holy grail of best ball leagues, of people trying to create that stack. And now while Travis Kelce's price has remained essentially static this year, Mahomes is much cheaper. And people still don't want to do it. So it's just funny how the tables have turned for the Chiefs at this point, where I'm more likely to stack Denver and then grab KC bringbacks like later on versus trying to stack KC and then get like any of the Denver bringbacks later.
Makes sense. Jen, I want to ask you about one final stack. You feel free to mention the Chiefs, but every once in a while I take Tyreek Hill in the second, Jalen Waddle in the third, because I can get the rest of those Dolphins way late. It's a really expensive thing to do, though, because you're taking an offense that wasn't super lucrative in fantasy points last year, and you're banking on 2 targets in their early rounds. So that's your team. That's the emphasis. So what do you think of that stack?
I haven't done it. I'm not going to lie. Like I haven't done it. I haven't done a lot of Dolphin. I mean, I've taken Hill and I've taken Waddle separately. Tua is one of those guys that I just don't end up taking. Like I'll have either grabbed my quarterbacks before him, and like I've grabbed Rodgers and Carr or Hurts and Rodgers or whatever it is, and I've already fulfilled myself, so I just don't end up taking Tua. I will say, and I'm not a big Gesicki person. Like it just doesn't. He's not someone that I'm going to take either. So I will say, if I do take Dolphins, I'll kind of go for the end of the line. I'll throw a bone at Sony Michel or Chase Edmonds or one of the running backs, even though it's so cloudy and so gross. But someone's got to carry the ball there. So I'll throw a little bit there, but I have not been spending for Hill or Waddle very much.
Interesting. I've got a lot of Hill this year, which is I don't usually have a lot, but he's there 2.10, 2.12,
Yeah.
3.1. And so I end up with a lot of
I have a
Tyreek
bit.
Hill, Tua. So, and because Tua's free, so Tua doesn't
Yeah.
cost you anything. So.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, just curious. I could sit here and talk for another hour about stacks and all of those sorts. In fact, I had to cut some of the things that we were going to talk about tonight because we ran out of time. But want to thank Jen and Chris for joining us as usual. Any final thoughts, Jen or Chris, before we go?
No,
got
don't
nothing.
reach. Don't
Yeah,
reach.
don't
Week 17
reach.
correlation rules all.
I will also say this because I spent 4 hours dealing with Verizon yesterday. Do not jump in the pool with your phone in your pocket like my 13-year-old did. So jumped in the pool with his phone, and now he does not have one for a little bit. So
Better advice than what I just gave.
Both are excellent advice, I think.
Yeah.
Equally useful, I would say. Equally useful. Because if you jump in the pool, then you although to be fair, if you jump in the pool with your phone, it'll be harder for you to overdraft and draft ahead of ADP, right?
True.
that is true.
Yeah.
That's right.
You won't be drafting.
Thank you so much again, Chris and Jen. Always a pleasure. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, listeners. You can follow us on Twitter at The Monday Mommy, at Chris Allen FFWX, and at Two Guys Brandon. Thanks so much for checking us out. Have a good day.